Frank,
Totally.
you
Totally.
are a cleanup hitter, my friend. Take us home.
Jeremy, you're going to sell a ton of books out of today. So congratulations. This has been really awesome. I wanted
fun.
to ask you to dive a little deeper. So I get the idea of how this can be fostered in an early stage company, but dive a little deeper into where you have the cultural intransigence of the necessary organizational structures that exist in a not necessarily mature, but an established business, all right, where people are actively, there's an article in the journal today about this company that saved hundreds of thousands of hours by canceling meetings. And I'm going to try to slow this down and make it concise, but we had in the company that I was with an innovation training, and several things were evident that you mentioned. One is people were intensely uncomfortable with it. People had absolutely, this was an established company, very heavy science based. They hated the idea of bringing up bad ideas. They hated the idea of brainstorming. All right. And they saw this as glue in the cogs of the organization. All right. And everybody understood that, hey, we got to be innovative, but we're trying to cut meetings and everybody hates this thing. And so what happens? It died. So, and I think that's more common than not in most organizations, regardless of their cultural makeup and their, the talent of the people. They see this as a time suck. Okay.
Yeah.
So could you elaborate a little bit more on how you can become an infectious agent and just grow this idea rather than impose it from the top down?
Yeah. I mean, so there's a bunch there. I mean, we could talk for the next couple of hours, Frank, but one of the things that I think, one of the myths that you have to dispel is that this is a time intensive enterprise, right? I mean, I dropped a link. That's the chat bot that I use to deal with my daughter's breaking the 115-year-old window. But it takes 3 minutes. It's not, by the way, my wife and I were hemming and hawing for more than 3 minutes in the kitchen, trying to figure out what to do before, so it's not like it's any more time, right? And I think for a lot of people, when they think about innovation, they think about the bright and shiny new object, the product or service, the customer facing thing. And then that relegates innovation to a very particular kind of edge case. The truth is that we all need novel solutions to problems that we're facing every day. I mean, I was talking to a president of a global insurance company, a woman who'd been through my program, and she actually, I'll show you. Let me see if I can find this. There's no personal information here, so I'm not betraying any trust. But she sent me this picture, and it's just beautiful because she was telling me, ever since I took your class, I started taking your this daily practice seriously. I started doing it, and oh gosh, where is it? I can't find it. It's not worth it. But she just sent me a picture of her notebook, of her Curious George notebook that she keeps on her front seat of her car. And she said, before I leave the garage every morning, I pull out the Curious George notebook that my granddaughter gave me. And she said, now I'm solving the world's problems in less than a minute a day, And I mention that because it's, and they're her problems. They're not the world's problems, right? They're not always her organizations, but I think one big impediment is when you go, okay, we're going to have an offsite and it's 3 days, if you calculate the time and that's not to say that equipping and developing and capacity building it does take time, of course, but to say that it always has to take time, or, like part of the challenge. And by the way, I'm like world's perpetrator number one as somebody who runs workshops or who ran workshops for a living until recently. I get that people can have the impression that if I want to develop this, it's going to take multiple days at a time. And then if I want to try to replicate it, it takes multiple days at a time, right? I think that the first step is reducing the friction and saying it's less than a minute. It just like, you're a clean person, right, Frank? You go, yeah, I try to be. Yeah. Well, how do you have time to be clean? How in the world do you have so much time? You go, it takes like 10 minutes to shower, right? It's not like the fact that I'm clean does, or you're healthy. Well, how do you have time to be healthy? You mean, not drinking the milkshake doesn't actually take any more time. It's just a decision, right? There's a lot of these things when you think about it as a capability, when you think about it as something to which I attend regularly, it doesn't mean, I exercise, but I'm not a triathlete. I don't spend all my time training. I do 10 minutes of HIIT exercise per day. And that's, enough, right? Well, breaking it down to where it's to kind of its component parts and component behaviors, it's not always about this big new initiative that we're launching or this big customer thing, which it can be. That's great. And, we can scale to that size, but it's also, what? I've got this pesky expense reimbursement annoyance. Great. In a minute, what can you do? What I have found, I've done things like this. Especially on the heels of the book, there's been a lot of keynoting and things like that, which is a lot of fun. And I enjoy doing that. Well, what I'll do, even in the middle of a keynote now, just because it demonstrates the point that we're making here, I'll throw up a QR code and have people do a idea quota on any problem they're facing right now. Do an idea quota. And then I just have people raise their hand. And the first prompt, if you go to that link, is what's the obvious answer in your mind? It's like, what would you do? What's your default answer, right? You put it in. And then there's like a bunch of zany prompts, right? But then I just ask you a question. Raise your hand if your first idea was the best one. And something like 5% of the room usually raises their hand. Wow. And the other 95% goes, I would have done that first thing. And it's totally fine. But and I only give them 5 minutes, right? In 5 minutes, I'm way more excited about the thing. And all it took was just a little bit of thinking differently, right? I think when you start to break down some of those assumptions around, it's got to take a long time. It's got to require specialized training. It's when you go, no, it doesn't have to take a long time. No, your brain's enough, then you can, and no, it doesn't have to be some huge new initiative. It can just be like the expense reimbursement thing or the broken window or whatever it is, right? Then you start to make it way more practical and accessible. And it's that routine engagement of the muscle that then prepares somebody for the more substantive thing and kind of greases the skids. They go, well, how else could I get new perspectives? Like, interesting question.
Yeah, that's excellent.
Right? But then they start to pull for it because they see the value. Whoa. Like one of the prompts, like, what's your favorite restaurant? People go, McDonald's. Well, how would McDonald's solve your problem? Oh, and then you go, wait, if I just thought of a really cool idea because I mashed up my problem with McDonald's, which, by the way, is totally haphazard and random seeming, which it's not entirely, but somewhat. If somebody sees the value in that, which they do, or another prompt is, what's illegal, right? People go, whoa. No, and everybody then goes, I'm not going to break the law, but it was actually really helpful, right? I know you're not going to break the law, right? But you start to realize there are all of these really kind of calcified constraints that we put on our thinking that if you just lift them for a moment, you just practice kind of lifting them, then people start to go, well, how else could I do that? And then you're responding to a pull rather than that imposing a push.
That's excellent. That is excellent. Thank you.
That was a mic drop moment. That was unbelievable.